Let us move on to the next chapter, which is nothing but income from other sources. Let us see income from other sources. Okay, this is our last head of income. Basically, in this chapter, we are trying to cover section 56, 57 as well as 58. So these are the three sections which are covered in the chapter called as income from other sources. So we will be covering section 56 to section 58. As we know, every head of income will be having its own charging section. Income from salary, income from salaries. The charging section is nothing but section 15. House property, the charging section is nothing but section 22. Profits and gains from business or provision. The charging section is what? The charging section is 28. Capital gain, the charging section is section 45. Like that, the last head of income, which is nothing but your income from other sources, the charging section is nothing but your section 56 is going to be something called as the charging section of income from other sources. This is a residual head. If any income is not taxable as income from salaries, as income from house property, profits and gains from business or profession, capital gains, then ultimately if that income is not exempted anywhere, it is taxable where? Under the head called as income from other sources. So now let us get into something called as the charging section, section 56. Let us see. Okay, charging section. Yeah. So now charging section is nothing but section 56. Let us see. Charging section. As every head of income speaks a lots and lots of conditions, section 56 is not speaking on that many conditions. Only three conditions of that. If you satisfy these three conditions, then ultimately that income is taxable as something called as income from other sources. Now, what are the three conditions which you are supposed to comply? Let us see the condition number one. Condition number one is something called as whatever receipt you are getting some sort of receipt. Condition number one says receipt should be income. So receipt should be income. So ultimately, whatever receipt you are getting, that receipt must be first of all an income. That's what is the first condition which you are supposed to comply. Then section 56 says the second condition. What is the second condition? Whatever receipt you are getting, first condition says that receipt is what? Income. Second condition says that receipt should not be exempted. Whatever receipt you are getting, if that is an income, and if that income is not exempted, then only section 56 is applicable. So here receipt, such receipt is not exempted under the provisions of Income Tax Act. So now such receipt, whatever receipt you are getting, such receipt is not exempted. So such receipt is not exempted under what? Provisions of Income Tax Act. So that receipt is not exempted under the provisions of Income Tax Act. So under the provisions of Income Tax Act, such receipt is not exempt. That's what the second condition speaks about. Third condition says that, as I said, income from other sources is a residual head. Your income is not taxable as salary income, not taxable as house property income, not taxable as business income, not taxable as capital gain, then only taxable as income from other sources if that receipt is an income and that receipt is not exempted under the provisions of Income Tax Act. Now the last condition is such income, such income is not, such income is not taxable. Where it is not taxable? Such income is not taxable under section 15. What is this? Income from salaries. Such income is not either taxable under something called as section 22, which is nothing but your income from house property. Such income is also not taxable under the section 28. Such income is also not taxable under something called as under section 45. That means not taxable as salary income, not taxable as your house property income, not taxable as your business income or provision income, not taxable as your capital. Then ultimately, if the other conditions are satisfied, so here I need to add one word, and that receipt should be an income, and such receipt is not exempted under the provisions of Income Tax Act, and such income is not taxable under section 15, under section 22, under section 28, under section 25, then ultimately we can say that income is taxable as income from other sources as per section 56 subsection 1. That's what is something called as section 56 subsection 1. Clear? Then let us move on to something called as subsection 2, which is very important. Okay, now let us say section 56 subsection 2. What is it? Section 56 subsection 2. Now let us try to understand what are the contents of 56 subsection. There are a lot of things which we need to consider. We'll discuss one by one. The first thing, under 56 subsection 1, it speaks about something called as dividend. See, I am not going to explain the topic of dividend here because already we have completed the portion of dividend. Dividend we have discussed, deemed dividend concept we have discussed, and even we have discussed something called as 115 BBDA. So I am not going to touch again the same topic here. So any dividend you get, the dividend, if that becomes taxable, either any section, is taxable under which head? Taxable as income from other sources by virtue of section 56 subsection 2. That's what is the first one. Then second one, there is something, second one, which is called as a casual income. Second one is something called as a casual income. What is the meaning of casual income? You had participated in a gambling. You had done some sort of betting. You have done some sort of lottery. You had won some prize money in a competition. You have participated in horse race. So any sort of money earned by these sources is something called as casual income. So any sort of income arrived by way of betting, gambling, okay, either you are playing some sort of card games, betting, gambling, card games, it could be horse race, it could be something you had won some sort of money by some crossword puzzles or any sort of games or any sort of contest. So you had attended Kaun Banega Crorepati, there you had won 1 crore prize money. So ultimately, even that is also something called as for casual income. So as it is a casual income, it is taxable as income from other sources under section 56, subsection 2, clause 1b. Clear? That's what is something called as for casual income. Then comes 1c. I mean section 56, subsection 2, clause 1c is speaking about something called as employees. Okay, employees contribution to something called as staff welfare. So employees contribution to staff welfare scheme. This point you should be very careful. Generally 99% of the cases, any sort of employees contribution to staff welfare fund is taxable under the head profits and gains from business or profession. 99% of the cases it is taxable as profits and gains from business or profession. 56 subsection 2 clause 1c says that taxable as income from other sources if not if not taxable, if not taxed under the head profits and gains from business or profession. If it is not taxable under the head profits and gains from business or profession, then only it is taxable as income from other sources. But if the same thing is taxed under the head profits and gains from business or profession, then it is not taxable as income from other sources. That's the reason we are mentioning employees' contribution to staff welfare fund if not taxed. If taxed under the head profits and gains from business or profession, the same thing we are not going to consider. Then 56 subsection 2 1D clause 1D is trying to speak about something called as interest. Interest. So you are getting some interest on securities. Securities includes debentures, anything. So on that securities, you are getting some sort of interest. Not only securities, you are having some sort of deposit in a bank. That deposit you are getting some sort of interest. Whatever interest on deposits or on securities you are getting, that interest or is taxable as income from other sources under section 56 subsection 2 clause 1. Now going forward, I'll explain there is something which we need to understand in this context, which is nothing but section 10 subsection 15, which speaks about exemption of interest. There is few exemptions we are having in the case of interest that I will explain the later. So once we finish off section 56, then I will come to section 10 subsection 15. There we'll see what are the cases where interest is exempted and what are the cases where interest is taxable. If the interest is exempted, to what extent the interest is exempted, it will clearly discuss when we are going through the corresponding section, which is nothing but your section 10 subsection 15. Okay, for the timing, any sort of interest on deposit or on the securities you are getting, that interest on deposit or securities is taxable under the head what? Income from other sources. Then next one. Okay. Now the second one is nothing but you are having some plant and machinery or you are having some sort of furniture. So you are having plant and machinery or you are having some sort of furniture. What is happening with the, this is different and this is different. Okay. So you are having some plant and machinery or you are having some sort of furniture. You are giving this on a rent and you are receiving some sort of higher charges. Any sort of rent received from giving plant and machinery or furniture on hire is taxable as income from other sources. When if renting is not your business, if renting is not your business, then whatever rent received is taxable as income from other sources. If renting is your business, ultimately you are getting some sort of business income. The same thing is taxable where? Under your business or profession. That's what is nothing but section 56 subsection 2 clause 2. Now let us move on to the other one. There is, of course, this point we have discussed when we are covering income from house property. Here the section says there is something called as composite rent. You are receiving some sort of composite rent. See, when we are discussing income from house property, there I had discussed the concept of composite rent. You are receiving some sort of rent for the facilities also. If the rent is separable, that separate portion is taxable as income from other sources. And the rent for the building is taxable as income from house property. Rent for the facilities, as it is separable, taxable as income from other sources. If the composite rent is not separable, then what? See, composite rent, there are two consequences: separable, unseparable. That means whatever composite rent which you are getting, either I can separate the composite rent. That means what? Rent for the building can be separated. Building rent you can separate. At the same time, you can also separate the rent for the facilities. If you are able to separate, then what happens? This rent of the building is taxable as income from house. Rent from the facility is generally taxable as income from other sources. If this is your business, then ultimately it is taxable as profits and gains from business or profession. So either income from other sources or it is taxable as profits and gains from business or profession. Generally, other sources. If the letting is your business, then that becomes as a part of your profits and gains from business or profession. Otherwise, it is taxable as PGBP. Wherever the rent of the facility, the rent of the building is inseparable or inseparable, then ultimately the entire composite rent is taxable as income from other sources. That's what is something regarding your composite rent. Again, composite rent means what? You are receiving the rent of the building, you are also receiving the rent of the facilities which you are giving. If the rent of the building is separable, say suppose 10,000 rupees towards the rent of the building, and I am also charging 5,000 rupees per month for the club facility or the gym facility which I am providing. So in this case, total amount is 15,000, of which 10,000 is separable, 5,000 is separable. So 10,000 rupees being the rent of the building is taxable as income from house property. 5,000 rupees being the rent of the facility is taxable as income from other sources. That's what is something regarding your composite rent. Now, the next one. Of course, this point we have discussed a lot of times. The next point is nothing but any sort of income received from something called as key man insurance policy. Keyman insurance policy under 56 subsection 2 is taxable if not taxable as salary income, not taxable as business income. So wherever it is not taxable under the head income from salaries or income from profits and gains from business or profession, then only that is taxable as income from other sources. Otherwise, the same thing is taxable as either salary income or income from business or profession. That's what is nothing but your next point. Now, let us see. Okay. Now let us move on to the next one here. There is a private limited company. A private limited company. Now, what this private limited company is doing? The private limited company is issuing shares. The private limited company issued shares. Okay? To whom? To public. So the private limited company issued shares to the public. The public is nothing but here resident. So the company issuing shares to the public, and the public here is nothing but the resident. And what is that private limited company? That private limited company is something which is called as closely held company. What is the meaning of closely held company? Closely held company is a company in which public is not substantially interested. So any company in which public is not substantially interested, that company will be said to be called as a closely held company. That closely held company is issuing shares to a resident. And how the company is issuing? The company is issuing the shares in excess. Okay, the company is issuing shares for a consideration. Let us see. The company is issuing shares for a consideration. What is that consideration? That consideration is in excess of fair market value. Say suppose fair market value of share of the company, let us assume to be 100. Okay, share market value, fair market value of the share of the company, let us assume to be 100. The company issue price is what? The company is going to issue the share say at 175 rupees. That means if the company is issuing at the fair market value, that's not an issue. But whenever the company is issuing at more than the fair market value, then comes the issue. So here, whenever any closely held company issuing shares to a resident, which is in excess of fair market value, such excess means what? In this case, what is the excess? 75 rupees is the excess. This 75 rupees is taxable as something called as income from other sources. It means the entire 175 is not taxable. Anything in excess of the fair market value is taxable as income from other sources under section 56 subsection 2 clause 7b. Now this have an exception. Here we are telling that private limited company issued shares to a resident. So here the act says resident other than. Resident other than. That means wherever the public limited company issues the shares to these people, then nothing is taxable. So in this case, not taxable. When it is not taxable, when the issue is happening to these people, it is not taxable. Let us say to whom. Whenever private limited company issues the shares to something called as venture capital. So there is something called as venture capital fund. Okay, anything where the shares are issued to venture capital fund, or there is something called as specified fund. Okay, the issue is happening to a venture capital fund, or the issue is happening to a specified fund, not tax. Even though the issue is happening at a more than fair market value, not taxable. So in this case, not taxable, it is going to be exempted. Then it also says you may not be a venture capital fund, you may not be a specified fund, but you are a class of person. You are a class of person notified by central government. Okay, any sort of issue happening by a public limited company, sorry, private limited company, which is a closely held company to a resident, is in excess of the fair market value. Such excess is taxable. But wherever the resident is a venture capital fund, or the resident is a specified fund, or the resident is a class of person notified by the central government, nothing is taxable. So if the issue is happening for these two people, not taxable. Other than these two categories of people, the issue becomes taxable. But whenever the issue is happening to a specified fund, conditions are violated, that becomes taxable. So these are nothing but your next point. Now let us move on to the other part of the section here. Okay. Then okay. Now let us move on to the next part. Interest on compensation. The next is nothing but interest. Interest on compensation. So you are receiving some sort of interest on something called as compensation. Then whatever interest you have received is taxable as income from other sources. So this is the recent amendment. With effect from Finance Act 2019, this section has been amended. Earlier, interest on enhanced compensation was taxable as income from other sources. Now, what the act says? Interest on compensation, either it could be the compensation, or it could be something called as enhanced compensation. Interest on compensation or interest on enhanced compensation is taxable as income from other sources. There is a compulsory equation. Say government has acquired your property on something called as compulsory acquisition. The government took your capital asset. Government has taken the capital asset by way of a compulsory acquisition. Then what the government will do? The government will pay some sort of compensation. So if there is a delay in compensation, ultimately the government has to pay some sort of interest. This compensation is taxable as your capital gains. Whatever compensation you get, that compensation is taxable as your capital gain, either long-term capital gain or short-term capital gain. Here we are not speaking about the compensation. We are speaking about something called as interest on the compensation. See, government has to give you compensation. Delay in compensation is happening. So what the government will do? The government has to pay interest on the compensation. So like that you are getting some interest on compensation. Or some compensation is given. You had filed a case in the court and the court has ordered to give you some sort of enhanced compensation. The government is now giving the interest on enhanced compensation. So either it is interest on compensation or interest on enhanced compensation where that is taxable as income from other sources. Then the next point is something advance money received, okay, and forfeited. What you are doing, you had received some sort of money in advance, and what you are doing, whatever money in advance you had received, you have not returned it back to the person. That advance money was forfeited. So advance money received and forfeited, then ultimately this particular section is going to be applicable. Now what it says, in this case I need to see one thing. Received, I mean advance received and forfeited. So when the advance is received and when the advance is forfeited. If the advance is received before, advance money received and forfeited before 1st April 2014, the provision is different. If the advance money is received and forfeited on or after 1st April 2014, the provision is going to be different. So what the provision says, advance money received and forfeited. Advance money received before 1st April 2014, the provision is different. Whatever advance money received and forfeited on or after 1st April 2014, the provision is different. If the advance money received and forfeited before this date, then we need to apply something called as section 51. This is a subject matter of your capital gains. This is not coming under the part of income from other sources. When if the advance money is received before 1st April 2014, forfeited also before 1st April 2014, then section 51 is going to be applicable, taxable as capital. Whenever advance money is received and forfeited on or after 1st April 2014, whatever amount you are forfeiting is taxable as income from other sources. So the date is before 1st April 2014, it's not taxable as income from other sources. That we'll discuss when we are going through section 51. There I will discuss this in much more detail. If the forfeiture is happening on or after 1st April 2014, then only it is subject matter of income from other sources, taxable as income from other sources. Clear? Now let us go to the next one. (56) subsection 2 clause 10, which is the most important part in the income from other sources. Let us see. Section 56 subsection 2 clause 10. This tries to speak about something called as gifts. Okay, gifts. For the part of this section, we can break the gifts three categories. You can receive the gift in the form of cash. You can receive the gift in form of movable property. You can receive the gift in form of immovable property. So we can categorize the gift into three categories: cash, movable, either immobile property, and the last one is something called as the movable property. So these three are the categories of gift you can get. Now let us get into the first part. The first part of the provision says, whenever you are receiving any sort of cash gift, and the provision tries to explain aggregate value of cash received. Aggregate value of cash received exceeds rupees 50,000. Okay, aggregate value of cash received exceeds 50,000, then what happens? Then whatever gift you are receiving, that becomes taxable. When it is taxable? Only when aggregate value of gift received exceed 50. Now what is the meaning of this? Let us try to understand the meaning of this. Say you are receiving gift from Mr. X, Mr. Y, Mr. Z and Mr. A. Okay, you are receiving gift from Mr. X, you are receiving gift from Mr. Y, you are receiving gift from Mr. Z and Mr. A. So these are the four people who are giving you some cash gift. So let us consider X has given you rupees 15,000 as gift. Y has given 12,000 rupees as gift. Okay. Z has given, say let us consider 10,000 rupees as gift. What is the total? 37,000 is the total. Now let us consider this person is giving you 14,000 rupees as gift. Now the total of all the gift received is something called as aggregate. What is the total coming? 27,000, 37,000, 51,000. So the aggregate amount of cash received exceeds 50,000. Now let us read the statement here. Let us go back. So what the provision is trying to tell? The provision is trying to tell you aggregate value of cash received exceeds 50,000. Then tax. What is taxable? Then it is taxable to the extent of what? Entire value of cash received. So that means in the present example, as the value exceeds 50,000, entire 51,000 is taxable as income from other sources. That's what is the meaning of something called as aggregate value of cash received exceeds 50,000. Entire aggregate value of cash received becomes taxable. If the value does not exceed 50,000, entire value is not going to be taxable. That's what the first part of the provision says. Now you are receiving immovable property as a gift. There may be two consequences which may arise. So here, immovable property received as a gift. Second case, immovable property received without adequate consideration. Immovable property received with, as a gift, immovable property received without adequate consideration. What is the meaning of this? Immovable property received without adequate consideration means, let us try to understand. Say suppose value of land. Land is an immovable property. There is a land. The value of the land, let us consider 10 lakhs. This entire 10 lakhs you are getting as a gift. Or there may be cases you are getting this 1 lakh as a gift by paying some consideration. Let us say the consideration is 1 lakh. Is the consideration adequate? Not adequate. Because the consideration is 1 lakh, the value of the land is 10 lakhs. So ultimately the consideration is not adequate. So ultimately that comes as a part of your second category. No consideration is paid. The land you are getting as a gift. First case. The 10 lakhs value of land you are getting by paying 1 lakh as a consideration. Second case. Now let us try to see what the act says. So in this case, the act says you are supposed to determine something called as stamp duty value. Arrive at the stamp duty value. Now what I should see? The stamp duty value could be what? Two scenarios can arise. Stamp duty value less than. Stamp duty value less than or equal to 50,000. The stamp duty value can be greater than 50,000. Whenever the stamp duty value is less than 50,000, what the provision says? The provision clearly says not taxable. Not taxable. Wherever the stamp duty value exceeds 50,000, then it becomes taxable. So how it is taxable? Entire whatever stamp duty value you have, entire value of stamp duty, entire value of stamp duty is taxable. Let us try to understand this with an example. Now, let us move here and try to discuss an example. Say, you are having a land. That land is something called as the immovable property. So you are having a land, and the land is something called as an immovable property. Say, Mr. Harsha is gifting this land, is giving this land as a gift to Mr. Hari. Okay, so as an example, Harsha is giving this land as a gift to whom? To Mr. Hari. That's what is the given transaction. So ultimately, we need to go to section 56, subsection 2, clause 10. As per section 56, subsection 2, clause 10, the value whenever any person is getting a gift, ultimately taxable as income from other sources. So this transaction is taxable as income from other sources. Now ultimately I should see whether the gift consideration is adequate or not. Say ultimately whenever there is zero consideration, I am not receiving any sort of consideration, then it comes under case 1. What case 1 says? Case 1 says to look into the stamp duty value. If the stamp duty value less than 50,000, nothing is taxable. Stamp duty value more than 50,000, entire stamp duty value becomes taxable. So let us consider in this case, stamp duty value is 1,50,000. The stamp duty value of the land transferred by Harsha to Hari is 1,50,000. So as the stamp duty value is 1,50,000. So as the stamp duty value is 1,50,000, which is more than 50,000. So as per section 56 subsection 2 clause 2, what it says? Entire 1,50,000 becomes taxable. See, if you read the provision, what it says, if the stamp duty value less than 50,000, nothing is taxable. Stamp duty value more than 50,000, entire stamp duty becomes taxable. So here 1,50,000 is taxable as income from other sources. That's what is the first part. Now let us try to move to the next part. So what we have discussed, gifting of immovable property we have discussed. Now let us see something, gifting of immovable property without adequate consideration. Okay, without adequate consideration, what we need to see. Okay, now let us see here. Whenever you are getting any sort of immovable property by paying some consideration which is not adequate, I need to find out something called as the difference. What is the difference? The difference is something, stamp duty value. I need to calculate. Say, I will explain the movable property later. So I am trying to explain this entire portion here itself. Movable property, let us try to understand it later. Right. So now let me explain the point here itself. Okay. So here, what is this consequences? Immovable property without adequate consideration. Without adequate consideration. So here, what is happening? Without adequate consideration, you are getting an immovable property as a gift. And how that is happening? Without adequate consideration means what? Let us go to the example, then we'll come back to the provision. Means if I consider the same example here, stamp duty value is 1,50,000. Now in this case, let us consider stamp duty value. So you are arriving at the stamp duty value. Let us consider stamp duty value is 1,50,000, and Harsha is charging a consideration. What is the consideration he is charging? the consideration charged, say suppose, is 40,000. Stamp duty value is 1,50,000, consideration is 40,000. So immediately what I should do, I should try to arrive at something called as the difference between stamp duty value and consideration. So what is the difference here? 1,50,000 minus 40,000, the difference I am getting it as 1,10,000. So I need to compute something called as a difference. Now let us come back to the provision. Let us discuss the provision now. Okay. So now whenever you are receiving consideration, my first step is to find out the difference. Difference of what? Stamp duty value less consideration received. To be frankly speaking, here also the same. Stamp duty value minus consideration received. So even here, whenever you are getting that as a gift, what is the meaning there? Consideration received is 0. So ultimately stamp duty value will become your difference there. That difference you are comparing with what? Less than 50,000, greater than 50,000. So now what you are trying to do? Without adequate consideration, find out the stamp duty value minus consideration. Now what happens? The difference could be less than or equal to what? To rupees 50,000. Or the difference could be greater than 50,000. So what could happen? The difference could be less than or equal to 50,000, or the difference is greater than 50,000. Whenever the difference is less than 50,000, what happens? Not taxable. So whenever the difference is less than 50,000, not at all taxable as income from other sources. Wherever the difference is greater than 50,000, I need to see few things. What I need to see? This difference I need to compare with what? Is the difference greater than 5% of consideration? Is the difference greater than 5% of consideration? If the answer is yes, okay. If the answer could be what? The difference could be greater than 5% of the consideration, or the difference could be less than 5% of consideration. The answer is what? Either yes or my answer is no. If the difference is greater than 5% of consideration, if your answer is yes, that means what? Greater than 5% of consideration. Then what happens? What is taxable? Entire difference is taxable. If the difference is not greater than 5% of consideration, difference is less than 5% of consideration, then ultimately not taxable. Let us see with an example here. Okay. In the case, what is the difference? The difference is 1,50,000. So as the difference is 1,50,000, difference is greater than 50,000. So now the difference is greater than 50,000. So now what I need to have? I need to consider something called as 5% of consideration. What is your consideration? 40,000 is your consideration. So take 40,000. 40,000 into 5%. Let us see what we'll be getting. So 40,000 into 5% if I do, I'll be getting something called as 2,000. Now what I should see? Is this difference greater than 2,000, or is this difference less than 2,000? If this difference greater than 2,000, entire difference is taxable. If this difference is less than 2,000, nothing is taxable. So here difference is 1,10,000. 5% of consideration is coming to 2,000. So what happens? 1,10,000 is taxable as income from other sources. Now let me change an example here. Stamp duty value. Let us consider stamp duty value to be 2 lakhs. The government has determined a stamp duty value as 2 lakhs. Now you are receiving some consideration. Let us consider the consideration received is 1 lakh. Or let me change. The consideration received is 1 lakh 20,000. Consideration received is 1,20,000. What is the difference? The difference is 80,000. Now, difference if less than 50,000, nothing is taxable. The difference is more than 50,000. What I need to do? I need to compute 5% of consideration. What is 5% of consideration? Consideration received is 1,20,000. Of that, 5% is going to be 6,000. So the consideration received is going to be 6,000. So as the consideration received is 6,000, difference is the difference is greater than 6,000. So ultimately what happens? Entire difference is taxable as income from other sources. Let me take another example here. Let us take your stamp duty value to be 1 lakh. Consideration received, let us consider 1,60,000. Consideration received is what? 1,60,000 is the consideration. Now what is the difference? The difference is 40,000. As the difference is less than 50,000, nothing is taxable as income from other sources. So in this case, income from other sources, nothing is taxable. That means whenever the difference between your stamp duty value and the consideration is not more than 5%, we are ignoring the difference. If the consideration is the difference between your consideration and stamp duty value is more than 5%, then only we are considering the stamp duty value. See again, my point to be highlighted here is, if difference between consideration and stamp duty value, consideration and stamp duty value greater than what? 5%, then only we are considering the stamp duty value. If the difference between consideration and stamp duty value is less than 5%, we are ignoring the consideration and we are ignoring the stamp duty value. We are considering only the considerations. Again, difference between consideration and stamp duty value greater than 5%, then what we will do? We are going to consider what? We are going to consider stamp duty value. Difference less than or equal to 5%, then what? We are ignoring stamp duty value and we are going to consider what? Consideration actually received. That's what is one of the most important point we should try to remember. So here what we are trying to do? We are trying to find out the difference. If the difference between, if the 5% of the consideration, means if the stamp duty value is less than or equal to 5% of the consideration, we are ignoring your stamp duty value. Wherever the difference is more than 5%, then we are ignoring the consideration received, then we are going to consider only the stamp duty portion. Now, let us move back to the problem, section 56 subsection 2, clause 10. Now, again if we summarize this, section 56 subsection 2 clause 10, you are receiving cash as a gift, you are receiving immovable property as a gift, or you may be receiving the mobile property as a gift. Whenever you are receiving cash as a gift, do the total. Do the total of the cash you are receiving from all the parties. If the total aggregate value exceeds 50,000, entire total is taxable. If the total is less than 50,000, nothing is taxable. Wherever you are receiving any sort of immovable property as a gift, do the stamp duty value. If you are receiving that as a gift, ultimately the stamp duty value, if it is exceeding 50,000, entire stamp duty value is taxable. In the first case, stamp duty value is 1 lakh. So as the stamp duty value exceeds 1 lakh, entire 1 lakh is taxable. Second case is what? You are receiving some consideration, but the consideration is not adequate, then you are supposed to compute something called as a difference. So now you need to arrive at the difference there. So what is the difference there? The difference is nothing but stamp duty value and the consideration. So now in the example we are seeing there, in the example you had received a consideration. Okay. In the present example, stamp duty value was 1,50,000. Consideration received was 40,000, which is not adequate. Then ultimately what we have done, we had find out the difference. So now once we find out the difference, what I need to do, I need to check whether the difference is less than 50,000 or greater than 50,000. If the difference is less than 50,000, nothing is taxable. If the difference is greater than 50,000, then I need to compare 5 with the 5% of the consideration. So as the difference is more than 5% of the consideration, so ultimately the entire difference becomes taxable. If the difference is less than 5% of the consideration, then ultimately it's not taxable, but the other case, the entire amount of thing is going to be taxable. This is the case of your immovable property. Now, the last part in this 56 subsection to clause 10, gift, is something called as a movable property. You are receiving the movable property without consideration is first one, or receiving the immovable property without adequate consideration. Either the movable property could be received without consideration or without adequate consideration. So let us see adequate consideration. Now almost the same as immovable property, only one difference will be there. In case of immovable property, you are calculating stamp duty value. In this case, you will determine something called as for fair market. What I need to see? Fair market value less than or equal to. So what we are trying to do, less than or equal to 50,000, or your fair market value could be greater than or equal to 50,000. In the first case, not taxable. In the second case, entire fair market value is taxable. Same as your immovable property. There is no change. Let us see. Harsha is giving a property worth of 1,50,000 to Mr. Hari. Say now, earlier it was a case of your movable property. Now let us consider Harsha is giving a jewelry as a gift to Mr. Hari. Value of the gift, let us consider fair market value of the jewelry is 1,50,000. Now, as the fair market value exceeds 1,50,000, entire fair market value becomes taxable. Fair market value less than 50,000, nothing becomes taxable. So there is no change between the provision of immovable property and movable property. Only one difference is there. Earlier, you are calling that as stamp duty value. Now you are calling that as a fair market value. That's what is the only one difference you are having. Earlier you are calling that as a fair stamp duty value. Stamp duty value greater than 50,000, less than or equal to 50,000. Less than or equal to 50,000 not taxable. Greater than or equal to 50,000 entire stamp duty value becomes taxable. Now as in the case of mobile property, entire fair market value becomes taxable if that is greater than 50,000. That's what is the first part of the provision says. Then okay, it's not equal to here, greater than 50,000 entire fair market value becomes taxable. Okay, so in the second case, whenever it is greater than 50,000, entire fair market value becomes taxable. Now, without adequate consideration, what is the meaning of this? Say the value of the jewelry is 1,50,000, but you are charging a consideration of only 40,000. This is nothing but the fair market value. This is nothing but the consideration receipt. So ultimately I can call this as what? Consideration which is not adequate. Same as your immovable property, what I am supposed to do? I am supposed to compute something called as a difference. Earlier you had find out the difference between stamp duty value and your consideration. Now I will find the difference between fair market value and the consideration receipt. So what is the difference here? 50,000 minus 40,000, or let 1,50,000. This is 1,50,000. Let me change the example here. The fair market value is 1,50,000. Okay, the fair market value is 1,50,000. Now what is the difference? The difference is 1,10,000. Now same as your immovable property, the difference could be less than or equal to 50,000, or the difference could be greater than 50,000. If the difference is less than 50,000, what the provision says? Nothing is taxable. If the difference is greater than 50,000, what the provision says? Entire difference is taxable as income from other sources. In the present case, the difference is greater than 50,000. So this entire 1,50,000 is taxable as your income from other sources under section 10, under section 56, subsection 2, clause 10. That's what is the provision which is explaining regarding the gift. But the one of the other most important part we need to understand here, what is the meaning of immovable property? That's what is one of the most important things. Movable property means what? What comes as a category of your movable property? Whether gifting of anything attracts income from other sources? No. If you gift any sort of mobile phone to your friend, nothing is taxable, because there is a list of mobile property which we need to understand. If this mobile property is gifted, then only it is taxable. Apart from this list of property, if you gift any other thing, it's not coming to be a purview of taxability. So here, what are considered as your mobile property? Any sort of gifting of shares comes as a part of your mobile property. If you are gifting something called as your securities, even that securities comes as a part of your mobile property. Gifting of something called as jewelry. So even if any person gifts jewelry, that jewelry is also coming under the purview of mobile property. Any sort of archaeological collections, or you are having some drawings, okay, you are having some sort of drawings, or you are having some sort of paintings, drawings, paintings, you are also having some sort of sculptures, you are having some sort of art, you are having some sort of bullion, gold coins or gold bullions or whatever it is. So any shares, any sort of securities, any sort of jewelry, any sort of archaeological collections, any sort of drawings, any sort of paintings, any sort of sculptures, any sort of artistic work, any sort of bullions, only this will be called as a movable property. Giving a car as a gift, not taxable. Giving a mobile phone as a gift, not taxable. Giving television as a gift, not taxable. So anything which is called as shares, securities, jewelry, archaeological collections, drawing, painting, sculptures, art, bullion is attracting the purview of your taxability. So only this comes as a part of your movable property. Then what comes as a part of your immovable property? It's very simple. Immovable property, there are only two. Either it could be land, or it could be buildings, or it could be both land and buildings. So that's what is something called as a movable property and immovable property. Now, to finish off section 56 subsection 10, we need to understand some exceptions. Let us try to understand the exceptions of section 10 subsection 50, section 56 subsection 2 clause 10. So exceptions of 56 subsection 2 clause 10 means what? Cases where gift, okay, cases where gift is not taxable. The cases where gift is not taxable. Let us try to understand what are those cases where the gift received is not taxable. Let us see. First case, any sort of gift received at marriage. At the time of marriage, whatever gift you receive, the entire gift is not taxable. Whether the value is more than 50,000 or not, it is immaterial. Irrespective of the value, any sort of gifts received at the time of marriage is completely exempted, not taxable. Irrespective of the value. Irrespective of value, of gift, irrespective of the value. You are getting a jewelry, the value worth of the jewelry is 2 lakhs. If the jewelry you are receiving at the time of your marriage, so ultimately nothing is not taxable. So entire value of gift is exempted, not taxable under section 56 subsection 2 clause 2. But apart from marriage, the gift is received at the time of birthday, that becomes taxable. This is provision applicable only where gift is received at the time of marriage. Then the next point says you are receiving gift anytime, not at the time of marriage. Gift received any time from whom? From relatives. So any gifts received any time from any person called as relatives is also not taxable. We'll discuss. Once all the exceptions are done, I'll explain what is the meaning called as relatives for this section. So any sort of gift received at the time of marriage from any person, whether relative, friend or anyone, is not taxable. Any sort of gifts received any time from relatives is also not taxable. From marriage, anyone, he may be relative or he may not be relative. But anytime, whenever you receive any sort of gift, either at the birthday or at the marriage or any time from a relative, so ultimately it's not going to be taxable if the gift is from relative. Any person at the time of marriage is not going to be taxable. Then you are receiving some sort of gift either by way of a will or by way of some sort of inheritance. Will or inheritance, even then that is also not going to be taxable. Any sort of gifts received under will or any sort of gifts received under inheritance is also not going to be taxable. Then any sort of money or any sort of cash or any sort of movable property or immovable property received at the time of contemplation of death. Contemplation of death. Okay. Any sort of gift received at the time of contemplation of death is not taxable in the hands of the legal heads. Say Mr. X has been expired. His employer has given some sort of consideration, some sort of money to his legal heads. So that money received in the form of cash is not taxable as income from other sources. So any sort of money received at the contemplation of death is not taxable. Even any sort of money received from a local authority is also not going to be taxable. Any sort of money received by any sort of institution or any sort of association, any sort of institution or association which is covered under section 10 subsection 23C of the Income Tax Act. Section 10 subsection 23C, there is an institution or association which is covered under section 10 23C. If that institute or association is receiving some sort of gift, then ultimately it's not going to be taxable, it's going to be exempted. Then any sort of gifts, any sort of gift received by a trust. You are a trust and you are registered under section 12A or 12AA of what? Of Income Tax Act. So any sort of trust registered under Income Tax Act, if the trust received any sort of gift in the form of cash, in the form of movable property, in the form of immovable property, nothing is going to be taxable. Entire thing is going to be exempted. Now, okay, the last one. The last one here, we need to discuss something called as any sort of transfer covered under section, let me write it again. So, you are receiving some sort of thing and that's what is called as a transfer as per section 47 of Income Tax Act. This we'll discuss later when we are going through the categories. There we'll discuss this section 47 in detail. So if any transactions are called as transfers under section 47, then the transaction is not called as a gift. Then it is not taxable under the head income from other sources. Now we need to discuss one point here. Meaning of relative. What is the meaning of relative? The relative starts with the word spouse. The spouse of the individual. The spouse of the individual is said to be called as a relative. Not only spouse. The spouse may be having some brother, or the spouse may be having some sort of sister. Brother or sister of the spouse, brother or sister of the spouse is also said to be called as relative. So ultimately, the spouse is called as relative. Brother or sister of the spouse is also called as relative. Now, parents. Parents of whom? Parents of self, and it includes parents of spouse as well. Parents, the SSC's parents, the spouse parents is also said to be called as the relatives for this purpose. Now, it also says that brother or, let me write it fully, brothers or sisters of the parents. Either parents, brother or sister of SSC's parent, or brothers or sister of the spouse parents, or even those people will be said to be called as relatives for this purpose. Not only the brothers and sisters and their spouses, here also, and their spouses. Okay, so it's put, okay, I will put that again separately so that makes you easy for your understanding. So relatives, if I try to say, if we use the word relative, first the word relative starts with the SSC. Okay, if we see the SSC, SSC is having spouse, SSC is having parents. So ultimately, the parents are called as relatives, the spouse is also called as relative. So SSC, spouse as well as the parents. Spouse is also having some parents. So ultimately, spouse is also having some, maybe also having some brothers, or spouse may also have some sort of sisters. Even the parents may also have some sort of brothers. Even the parents may have some sort of sisters. Okay, so the spouse parents are also the relatives of the SSC. His parents is also relatives of the SSC. Not only the parents, brothers or sisters are also called as relatives of the SSC. Spouse, parents, brothers and sisters are also called as relatives of the SSC. Not only brothers and sisters, the act also says their spouses. That means spouse of spouse brother. Spouse is having a brother. Her brother's spouse is also called as the relative of the SSC. Spouse is having a sister. The sister's spouse is also said to be called as the relative of the SSC. Same case. SSC's parents are having brother. SSC's parents' brother is having a spouse. Even that person is also said to be called as the relative of the SSC. And finally, the act says lineal ascendant and lineal descendant. What is the meaning of this? Say, for the spouse, the act says brother or sister, younger brother, elder brother. But coming to the SSC, the act is not telling it is brother or sister or whatever it is. What the act says, lineal ascendant. Anyone who is your lineal higher, older to you is something called as lineal ascendant. It could be your elder brother, elder sister, lineal descendant. It could be the younger brother, younger sister of the SSC, or it could be the children of the SSC. And it also says, same point again, spouses. Spouse of lineal ascendant, spouse of lineal descendant. So that's what is the persons who are called as the relatives. Again, spouse, brothers and sisters of the spouse, their corresponding spouses are called as relatives. SSC's parent, SSC's parents, spouse parents are called as relative. The parents may be having some brothers or sisters. Even those people, those brothers and sisters will be also be called as relative. Not only those brothers and sisters, their corresponding spouses are also called as relative. Anyone who is an elder to the SSC is someone called as lineal ascendant. That could be elder sister, that could be elder brother. Anyone who is lineal descendant is also said to be called as the relatives of the SSC. It could be younger brother, it could be his children. And it also says the spouses of the lineal ascendant and the spouse of the lineal descendant is also called as the relative for the SSC. That's what is complete picture of section 56 subsection 2 clause 10. With this we had completed section 56 subsection 2. So then we can move on to something called as section 57, which speaks about deductions. Only we are having a very lesser deduction. So now let us get into something called as section 57. Sorry, it's not 56, section 57 deductions. So now let us see the deductions part, which is covering under something called as section 56. Deductions under section 56. Let us see. Deductions under section 57. Let us try to understand. Now, there are only 5 things which we need to understand here. The first thing is nothing but commission paid. You are paying some sort of commission. For what? Commission paid for receiving dividend or interest. You are paying some sort of commission to the bank. You are getting some sort of interest. Let us assume the interest is taxable. So whatever amount of interest you are receiving, say suppose dividend received from, you are receiving some sort of dividend from where? Foreign company. So in this case, whatever amount of dividend received is taxable. So let us consider you had received a dividend of 1 lakh. This 1 lakh is taxable as income from other sources. But now what section 57 says? To receive this dividend, you are paying some sort of bank commission, or you are paying something called as bank charges. Bank is charging 2% of the dividend as a commission. So on 1 lakh 2%, that is coming to 2000 is the commission which is charged. Now what section 57 says? Section 57 says that this 2000 rupees you can take this as reduction. And what is taxable? Taxability is nothing but 98,000 rupees received is taxable as income from other sources, not the 1 lakh. For earning this 1 lakh, you are paying a bank charges or a commission of 2000 rupees. That 2000 rupees you can take that as reduction, and 98,000 rupees you are taxable as your income from other sources. Next. The next one is nothing but expenses incurred for earning composite rent. You are incurring some sort of expenses to earn the composite rent. So whatever expenses incurred to earn the composite rent, that expenses can be taken as reduction. For example, say in the earlier case I had mentioned that, okay, let me write it separately. In the earlier example I had mentioned rent for building. Okay, let us consider 10,000 rupees per month, and rent for the facility, let us consider 5,000 rupees per month. Now what is this 5,000? This 5,000 is something called as composite rent, and this 5,000 is something which is taxable as your income from other sources. This 5,000 is what? Taxable as income from other sources. Now to earn this income, you see, let us consider what is the facility you are providing. You are providing a gym facility to the tenant. Now to provide this facility, every month you are incurring some repairs and maintenance activity. You are incurring some sort of repairs and maintenance activity. Let us consider 2000 rupees is the repairs and maintenance you are incurring, and you are also incurring something called as electricity charges for the gym. Let us consider the electricity charges is coming to 500, and you are incurring some other expenses. Let us consider the other expense is coming to what? 500. So what is the total expense incurred? You had incurred a total expenses of 3000. Now what section 57 says? Generally section 56 says composite rent. What is the amount of composite rent? 5,000 rupees per month. Of course 5,000 equals 60,000 you are getting. Now 5,000 is taxable as under section 56. Then what section 57 says? Any sort of expenses incurred to earn the composite rent. Without incurring maintenance you cannot earn 5,000. Without paying the electricity or without incurring the electricity charges, you cannot incur the 5,000. Without incurring the other expenses, you cannot incur the 5,000. So ultimately, whatever expenses you are incurring, what is the expense you are incurred? 3,000. So 2,000 rupees per month. So ultimately 2,000 into 12, 24,000 rupees is taxable as income from other sources, not 5,000. 24,000. That means 2,000. After claiming 3,000 rupees as reduction, the remaining balance is taxable as your income from other sources. That's what is nothing but the second deduction which you can consider. Now, third. Third one is something called as family pension. Third one, family pension. What is the meaning of family pension? When, say, let me take an example. There is a company called as ABC Limited. There is a company called as ABC Limited. In the ABC, Mr. X is an employee. Mr. X is an employee in a company called as ABC Limited. Now, this person got retired. Mr. X retired from the organization. After his retirement, ABC Limited is paying some sort of pension, monthly pension. Let me be more specific. Let us call this as a monthly pension. We know this monthly pension is something called as a uncommuted pension. What is this uncommuted pension? This uncommuted pension is taxable. Whether you are a government employee, whether you are a non-government employee, this uncommuted pension is taxable as income from salary. Now, let me extend the situation here. Mr. X died. So due to some incident, Mr. X expired. Now what the company will do? The company will pay this pension to his legal heirs, Mrs. X. Now his legal heirs, Mrs. X, is going to receive the pension. Now what happens? Earlier, there was an employer-employee relationship. This was taxable as income from salaries. Now, Mrs. X is not an employee. Employer-employee relationship is not there. So, whatever pension Mrs. X is receiving, that pension should be taxable as income from other sources. Now, let me extend this case. Say, let us consider 5,000 rupees per month. Okay, pension received by Mrs. X, 5,000 rupees per month. Then ultimately what is the total? 60,000 rupees per annum is the total. 56, section 56 says this is taxable as income from other sources. But now we need to understand something called as section 57. What section 57 says? Section 57 says least of the following. Least of the following is allowed as reduction. What is the least? First point. The first point of the provision says that, let us say, 1/3 of such income. So what is the least? 1/3. 1/3 of such income. 1/3 of such income or rupees 15,000 or rupees 15,000, whichever is least is allowed as reduction. Now let us come back to this example. What is that income? 60,000. 1/3 of 60,000. So 1/3 of 60,000, which is coming to what? 20,000. So what the provision says? 20,000 or 15,000, whichever is least. What is least? Least is 15,000. So what I will do? I will give 15,000 as reduction. So here, family pension. Family pension is what? 60,000. Less deduction under section 57. 1/3 of 60,000 or 15,000. What is least? 15,000 is least. So what we are going to give? 60,000 minus 15,000. So ultimately, what is the difference there? 60,000 minus 15,000, the difference is going to be 45,000. So the 45,000 is taxable as your income from other sources. That's what is the other deductions. Again, if we try to cover the deductions, we have discussed how many deductions there. Let us see quickly one by one, then we'll move on to the next one. First one is nothing but whatever amount of commission received. That commission received for earning interest or dividend is allowed as reduction under section 56. You are receiving a dividend of 1 lakh, for which 2000 rupees is paid as commission, 98,000 is taxable. Expense incurred for earning a composite rent. You are earning a composite rent, say for example 5,000 rupees per month. To earn that 5,000 rupees per month, you had incurred repairs, electricity and other expenses, total put together 3,000. So ultimately 2,000 rupees per month is taxable. 2,000 into 12, 24,000 rupees is taxable. That's what is the second deduction which we have discussed. Then we had moved to something called as family pension. Employer paying a pension monthly to the employee is taxable as income from salaries. But once the employee expired and the same thing is received by the legal heirs, we'll call this as what? Family pension. That means the pension received by the legal heirs. Any sort of pension received by the legal heirs is something called as family pension. That family pension is taxable as income from other sources. But section 57 says least of the following two. What is the least of the following two? 1/3 of such income or 15,000, whichever is least. In the present case, family pension received is 60,000. 1/3 of that is 20 and 15,000. What is least? 15,000 is least. So as per section 57, 15,000 be allowed as reduction and 45,000 is taxable as income from other sources. Now, the next one. Any sort of expenses incurred to earn. Expense incurred to earn income is allowed as reduction. Any sort of expenses, whatever amount of expense you are incurring to earn income is allowed as reduction. The point is very big. Let me put an example so that you can easily understand. So what the point says here, any sort of expenses incurred to earn an income. Say suppose you had purchased 10% debentures. Okay, what you had purchased? 10% debentures were purchased. The total amount of debentures is 1 lakh. So ultimately, you will be getting what? Debenture interest. You are receiving something called as a debenture interest. What is the amount of debenture interest? 10% on 1 lakh, which is nothing but something called as 10,000 rupees is received as your debenture interest. How you had purchased? You had taken a loan of rupees 1 lakh. You have taken a loan of rupees 1 lakh at, let us consider, the rate of interest of 6%. You have taken a loan of 1 lakh by paying 6% as interest. So what is the amount of interest you are paying? 6,000 rupees is nothing but the interest. So what is this interest? Expense. What is this debenture interest? Is an income. Now what this point says, expenses incurred to earn income. You are incurring 6,000 rupees as an expense for earning an income of 10,000. So as per section 57, what I can do? I can take 6,000 rupees as a deduction. So ultimately 4,000 rupees is taxable as your income from other sources. So what is taxable? Not the entire 10,000. Any sort of expenses incurred to earn some sort of income is allowed as reduction for computing the income from others. So you are earning an income of 10,000. For earning an income of 10,000, you are paying an interest of 6,000. So ultimately, what is taxable? 4,000 rupees is taxable. That interest, you can take that as an deduction. That's what is the next last one. The last deduction under section 57 says what? 50% of interest on compensation. 50% of interest on what? Compensation or enhanced compensation. 50% of interest on compensation or enhanced compensation is allowed as deduction. So what the point is, 50% of interest on compensation or enhanced compensation is allowed as deduction. Say suppose interest on compensation. Say earlier we have discussed under section 56 subsection clause 2 that whatever interest which the government is giving to you on the compensation is taxable as income from other sources. So now what section 57 says, suppose interest on compensation you are getting 1 lakh. Now what section 57 says? Section 57 says 50% of such interest. What is the amount of interest you are receiving? 1 lakh. What is 50%? 50% is amounting to 50,000. So 50% of such interest, 50% of interest is allowed as reduction. So ultimately 50,000 is taxable as income from other sources. That means whatever interest on compensation, whatever interest on enhanced compensation you are receiving, of that 50% is allowed as deduction. The balance income is taxable as income from other sources. Now, the last part of this chapter is nothing but section 58. Section 58 is speaking about something called as disallowances. What is the meaning of disallowances? Not allowed as deductions. So disallowances is something which are not allowed as deduction. Now let us try to understand what are the three things. Only three things are there. What are the things which are not allowed as deduction? Let us try to understand. If you are incurring any sort of personal expenses, earlier one point has been mentioned. Any sort of expense incurred is allowed as deduction. But if the expense incurred is a personal expenditure, it is allowed. Next, interest paid outside India. You are paying some sort of interest outside India. Interest paid outside India without deduction of tax. Without TDS, if any sort of interest is paid outside India. Say, if I go back to the same earlier example. Earlier, I had discussed one example where you had purchased the debentures. You had taken a loan of 1 lakh. If you are taking this loan outside India, then you are paying this interest outside India. Then what the tax is? You can take this as deduction if you are deducting the tax. Without deducting the tax, if the TDS is paid, you cannot deduct this as deduction. Disallowed. So whenever the loan is borrowed from outside India, deduction can be taken only if TDS is deducted. If the interest is paid outside India without deduction of TDS, that is going to be disallowed. Then the last one. Any sort of expenses incurred, any sort of expense incurred to earn casual income. Any sort of expenses incurred to earn casual income is disallowed. You are doing an betting in IPL. So whatever money which you had put for IPL is the something called as for the betting or gambling is the expenses. You had won some sort of prize money. That as per section 58, any sort of expenses incurred to earn the casual income will be disallowed. It should not be allowed as deduction. And finally, one important point I want to mention here. All incomes, okay, whatever income you are considering as a part of your income from other sources, all incomes should be considered gross. All income should be considered gross but not net. Gross of what? Gross of taxes. Means what? Say suppose you had won a prize money. You had participated in Kaun Banaya Crorepati. You had won a prize money. Let us consider amounting to 10 lakhs. Let us consider the prize money which had won is 10 lakhs. Generally what will happen? Of course, this again I will discuss when we are going through TDS concept. There we will discuss. There is one provision under TDS which I am not discussing the section number. I will just explain the provision there. The provision says 30% has to be deducted. So there is a tax deduction of 30% on the prize money. 10 lakhs into 30%. What is the amount you are getting? 3 lakhs is the amount you are getting. So ultimately, you won't be receiving 10 lakhs. You will be receiving only 7 lakhs. This is the prize money received. prize money received is not 10. The prize money received is 7 lakhs. What the payer will do? He will pay this 10 lakh, 3 lakhs to the government. So to the government, this 3 lakhs will be paid and will be receiving only 7 lakhs. So we'll call this as what? Net. Net amount received is 7. But when you calculate your income from other sources, you should not consider net. What you have to consider? You are supposed to consider the gross. In your problem, it may be mentioned that prize money received. So you will be mentioning as what? Prize money received is mentioned as what? Let us say prize money received is mentioned as 7 lakhs. That's it. So your problem will mention it as only prize money received is 7 lakhs. And he will be mentioning you what as prize money received 7 lakhs, and it will be mentioned here as net. He will be mentioning this as what? Net. That means what? Tax rate is 30%. This 7 lakhs is 70%. You need to compute something called as 100%, which is nothing but the gross. So you need to compute the gross, and the gross amount has to be considered when you determine your income from other sources. So with this, we have completed successfully the income from other sources. As I said earlier, one point we need to discuss, something called as section 10 subsection 15. What is this? Interest. Interest. What this says? This says that interest is generally exempted under section 10 subsection 15. When that is exempted? Whenever you are getting interest, okay, or you are getting some sort of premium on what? Premium on redemption. Interest or premium on redemption on what? On that could be some sort of bonds, or that could be some sort of securities. Who had issued this? These bonds or securities are issued by the central government. So whenever you are purchasing bonds or securities issued by the central government, on that if you are getting any sort of interest, on that you are getting any sort of premium on redemption, that is not taxable. That interest or premium on redemption on bonds or securities issued by central government is exempt from tax under section 10 subsection 15. Then the next one. The next point which we need to discuss here is something. You are receiving some sort of interest. Interest on post office. Okay. You are receiving some sort of interest on post office savings account. On the post office savings account, you are receiving some sort of interest. Whatever amount of interest you are receiving, of that, a part of the interest means what? Rupees 3,500 per annum is exempted. So whatever amount of interest you get of that 3,500 per annum is going to be exempted. See, post office savings account, you can open individual account, or you can open something called as joint account. Individual account, the person who had opened the account, say he is receiving, say suppose 10,000 rupees is the interest on post office savings account. What the act says? 10 subsection 15 says 3,500 is allowed as exemption. What is the difference? 6,500 is 6,500 is something taxable as your income from other sources. That's the case of your joint account. Individual. Whereas the case of joint account, the total amount of exemption, which either both the parties or only one single party can take what? 7,000 rupees. So 7,000 rupees per annum is exempted. Only one, either each person can take 3,500 and 3,500, or one person can take the total amount of rupees as an exemption of 7,000. So suppose the joint account is giving a deduction of 10,000. Only one person can take the deduction. So then what he can do? Total rupees 7,000 he can take as deduction. So ultimately 3,000 rupees is taxable as income from other sources. If one person take the entire 7,000, the other person cannot take the deduction of 7,000. That's what is something called as the interest on post office savings bank account. And next one, you are getting some interest on what? Interest on notified bonds. So interest on notified bonds, any sort of person who is either individual, any person who is individual or any person who is an HUF holding some bonds and which is called as a notified bonds. And on the notified bonds, if you are getting any sort of interest, that amount of interest is exempted under section 10 subsection 15. Then the next one is nothing but interest on notified NRI bonds. You had purchased some bonds, and what are those bonds? And those bonds are something called as a NRI bonds, and that bonds are notified. That interest on notified bonds is also exempted in section 10 subsection 15. Now the next one is something interest on bonds issued by whom? By local authority. If the local authority is issuing some bonds, on that bonds, if you are getting any sort of interest, that amount of interest is also allowed as exemption under section 10 subsection 15. Okay. Now the next one, you are receiving some sort of interest. Interest received by whom? Interest received by a person called as non-resident or a person called as resident but not authorized. Interest received by a resident, sorry, interest received by non-resident or interest received by resident but not authorized. On what? On deposit. When the deposit is made? The deposit is made on or after, any sort of deposit made on or after 1st April 2005. Any sort of deposit made by non-resident or RBOR on or after 1st April 2005, where in offshore banking unit, in offshore banking unit. So any sort of deposit made by a non-resident or RBOR in an offshore banking unit on or after 1st April 2005, then that interest is also not taxable, exempted under section 10 subsection 15. Now the last point which we have to consider is something which is the latest amendment. Okay, interest payable. Interest payable to whom? Interest payable to non-resident. Any sort of interest payable to a non-resident. By whom? By something called as IFSC. What is IFSC? International Financial Service Center. So IFSC is something called as International Finance Service Center. International Finance Service Center is something called as IFSC. Now, any sort of interest payable by IFSC to whom? Non-resident. Why the IFSC will pay? On money borrowed. On money borrowed. Means what? Non-resident has borrowed a money from International Finance Service Center. Okay. Interest is payable to a non-resident. So ultimately, whenever any sort of money is borrowed and whenever the interest is payable to a non-resident, so IFSC has borrowed a money from a non-resident and IFSC need to pay some sort of interest. So wherever any sort of interest is payable to a non-resident, then ultimately on the money borrowed, if the money is borrowed on or after 1st September 2019, then whatever interest payable to a non-resident is not taxable is completely exempt. Say again, IFSC has borrowed a money from a non-resident. So ultimately IFSC has to pay the interest. So as IFSC has borrowed the money, if the interest is paid or payable. If the money is borrowed on or after 1st April 2019, then whatever interest which the non-resident receives is not taxable. It is exempted under Section 10, subsection 15. This is the recent amendment as per Finance Act 2019. So with this, we are done with income from other sources. Clear? So in the next session, we'll try to understand something called as set off and carry forward. Clear?